Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Monday Lunchtime Digest for September 29, 2025. Happy Monday, Haley.
Happy Monday, Micah.
Hey, it is so good to see everyone here. We have a lot to talk about today. So, just a few things that I wanted to share. Looking at recently, News Channel 4 reported that the Oklahoma Department of Mental Health is doing very little to comply with its 2023 lawsuit that was against Oklahoma Department of Mental Health. And this was concerning them not giving treatment to criminal defendants who have been found incompetent to stand trial. So a lot of these defendants would be there incarcerated at the forensic center. And I don't know if incarcerated is the right term, detained at the forensic center there in Veneta for years and would not receive treatment in order to make them competent to be able to stand trial. And so this was based on a settlement that was in 2023 that they would do certain things. And so this was reported by KFOR on Friday about a report that recently came out. So they reported that according to the report that was released, the Oklahoma Department of Mental Health has not met several deadlines. They list all of these here. Something that they did do was they did meet a deadline for training some staff, but other than that, really have not done a lot on that yet. And so that is something that I want to keep an eye on, just to kind of see how they are doing in meeting those requirements of that lawsuit. The other thing is that K12drive.com, which reports on education in K through 12, is reporting that the education department is bringing back some of its mental health grants. And so they're reporting that the education department, how it had stopped school-based mental health service grants earlier this year, but that it is now bringing back some of them. However, they are only looking at focusing on school psychologists and are not looking at school counselors or social workers as part of that grant program. So they're wanting to increase school psychologists in schools. And so, hey, at least it's some money for mental health, but unfortunately, it's not going to be, these grants aren't going to be for school counselors or for social workers. So that is what they're reporting. Haley, what do you have?
Well, so with the grants increasing school psychologists, I think that's a good thing, but it is kind of problematic, as you say, because school psychologists, a lot of their role is to assess for things, and so they might do assessments for learning disabilities. They might do functional assessments for like classroom management, but if we don't have the support staff or the folks who are trained, like the therapists, counselors, to implement those things, then we might have a lot of data and a lot of maybe 504 plans to be created, but we still have to have the ability to implement those too. And so it is look at one part of the problem, but which is good. I mean, we want to have kiddos to be diagnosed as early as they can if they do meet criteria for things like dyslexia, dyscalculia, things like that, but not having the infrastructure or the funding in place to have those folks who could actually treat it. I mean, that can be, I think that's going to be an issue too.
Yes, I agree, definitely.
Yeah. And so what I have for today is a study from Boston University. And so Boston University was looking more into why are some memories more salient than others. And so as we know, as the research has suggested for a long time, if we have a memory that is tied to a very strong emotion, we're more likely to remember it. And so I'm sure that we can all look back and think about, where were we on September 11th, or maybe on our wedding day, or whenever we have a child that's born, like anything that's really emotionally salient, we're going to be more likely to remember the details of that. But what research has been trying to figure out is, what about those other small memories that are that we remember in great detail as well? What are the learning mechanisms behind those? And so this was actually, this study examined 10 different studies on memory. 650 participants. And what they found is that when it comes to small memories, it's easier to, of course, remember small memories if they're tied to bigger events, but they really wanted to understand why and how is it that our brain records those. And what they found was that if there was a small memory that happened after a big event, so I think about on 9/11. I remember being in the classroom and watching the videos, but I also remember everything else that happened that day. I remember waiting in school as my classmates were picked up. I remember waiting for my grandma to come get me. So I remember all these small things. And so what the study found is that if you have a big emotional event, you're more likely to remember the things after the event because the emotions don't necessarily go away. But what it found is how your brain remembers the things that happened before it. So I'm sure we can all think about times when we had like this big emotional event. All of a sudden, we remember the things that happened before it. What the brain does for those memories before it is it actually ties small details from that memory to the big memory. And so what they found is that if they were given a big emotional event, maybe they won a prize, maybe they had some media that they're looking at that was very jarring, how their brains would remember the things that happened beforehand is that it would tie it to like, oh, well, there was this woman was wearing a blue jacket I saw on the way to work. And whenever I was, in this big maybe when my child was born, the nurse was wearing blue scrubs. And so it was anything that happened before. It's like the brain went back and said, okay, well, this leading up to this also important. So let's find some ways to encode it because we didn't necessarily have the emotions to draw from beforehand. And so what's really awesome about this study is that it can give us some indications into how we can better remember things. And so this further research, what the study wanted us to look at is, how can this be used for studying? How can this be used for preventing Alzheimer's? How can this be used for remembering things? Like, it's really looking at the mechanisms of the brain behind how and why we store this information. And maybe we can use that to improve memory in the future.
That's really interesting. And so, as you were talking about that, I was thinking also about triggers for traumatic memories, where, you're talking about the blue scrub situation. It's, seeing a blue scrub and then that reminding of the woman that wore the blue jacket right before this thing that happened, how that can be a trigger for flashbacks then.
Absolutely. And this study actually goes into how this can be useful for trauma treatment as well, because as we know, those of us who work with exposure-based therapies, a big component of trauma treatment is exposing ourselves to those memories until the emotions aren't as big. And so if we can, what this research study really looked at is like, not only how do we make memories last longer, but how do we make traumatic memories decrease faster? And so as we know, again, the exposure to those memories, we are no longer as emotionally triggered by those memories. And so they stop becoming so lifelike in us, or so they stop becoming so salient, if you will. And so I feel like that was a really interesting study. And yeah, I guess, going through school, teachers always taught us like mnemonic devices, how they can be helpful, or, associating words or situations to be helpful with learning. And I guess our brain kind of does that for us. So even more reason to use those mnemonic devices when you're trying to learn something new, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And just kind of a shameless plug for some of our on-demand courses. We have written exposure therapy, which is an on-demand course that is evidence-based to treat post-traumatic stress disorder, and then also cognitive processing therapy. We have an on-demand course for that as well. And one of the things that I continue to find interesting in whenever using written exposure therapy is whenever people start writing, how more details of the event comes out. And the more that they write about the story, the more it seems to unlock some of those memories that the things that have been suppressed, repressed, how it unlocks some of those things and they start to come out more. And I always find that very, very interesting. So thank you for that, Hayley.
Absolutely.
So what are some other things that are going on at OCI?
So we have a big week this week at OCI. First of all, on this coming Wednesday, we have Whimsical Wednesdays. And so Whimsical Wednesdays is a time for mental health professionals to meet up, to have fun, and play some games and earn some CEUs. And so this week, it'll be Wednesday, October 1st from 5:30 to 7 p.m. and it is going to take place at the Community Axe Throwing. So Community Axe Throwing is located down in Oklahoma City. We're going to be meeting up there about 5:30 or so. It's free to attend, but if you want to throw axes, there is a cost. You'll have to pay the facility, but we're going to meet up. And Micah, what do you think our game should be this week? Should we have an axe throwing competition for years?
Oh man, I think so. I think that would be perfect.
I think that would be perfect. So come join us for axe and knife throwing, or just to hang out and have a soda pop and enjoy each other's company. But again, we'll be meeting this Wednesday, October 1st, 5:30 to 7 p.m. at Community Axe Throwing. And so also this week, we have another series of live webinars. So this Friday, October 3rd, we're going to have 2 live webinars. In the morning, we're going to have Laura Byler, LPC, who will be talking about an introduction to dialectical behavioral therapy. And then in the afternoon, we'll have Dr. Frances Patterson, who will be doing a 3-hour substance abuse or addictions counseling specific webinar on treating THC addiction in adolescents and young adults. And so we have 2 very fantastic trainings. Laura Byler is certified by the Linehan Institute. And then Dr. Frances Patterson actually wrote the SAMHSA guide on marijuana addiction treatment for adolescents. And so 2 highly skilled, highly qualified, fantastic presenters we'll have. And so that'll be again this Friday, October 3rd, 9 a.m. for Laura Byler, 2 p.m. for Dr. Frances Patterson. And you can learn more at counselinginstitute.org.
Great. I know, looking forward to both of those. And I know the THC addiction, I mean, that is something that we're seeing more and more of, where just the high potency, where people are dealing with, addiction issues from cannabis use. So both of those are fantastic. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And so that's all I have for OCI this week. Mike, is there anything else we want to talk about today?
Well, yeah, I just want to remind everyone about all the services that we have at Edmond Counseling and Professional Development. You can find out about all those at edmondcounseling.com. Of course, we have our Smart Recovery meetings. Smart Recovery is an alternative to 12-step. It is a free peer support meeting. And so you can find out more about that at smartedmond.com. Also, we have the Smart Family and Friends meeting, which is Smart's version of Al-Anon. And so if you have a client who has a loved one that is dealing with addiction, then you can have them come check out our Family and Friends meeting. And of course, information for both of those can be found at smartedmond.com. Also, just as a reminder, besides providing counseling services for children, teens, and adults, we also provide organizational wellness trainings. And so if your organization would like to have us come in and talk about burnout prevention, stress management, any of those types of things, then they can call us up. You can contact Hayley at hello@edmondcounseling.com, or call or text us at 405-440-3034 to get more information about that. And then the other thing that we do that I don't know a whole lot of other places outside of universities that do it are career assessments. And so if you have a client who is 18 years old or older, or a family member, loved one that is just wanting a little bit more direction, then you can send them to us. And we have a 2-session career assessment protocol that we do, so that after those 2 sessions, they will walk away, have a better understanding of what their interests are and what types of careers more closely line up to what their interests are. And again, you can find out more about all these at edmondcounseling.com.
Absolutely. Lots of great offerings we have. I know I'm biased, but I think we got a lot of good stuff going on.
I think so too. I agree. So Hayley, who is our winner for this week?
So our winner for this week, drum roll please, is our good friend Kiera Morris. Yay, Kiera.
Hey, Kiera. Congratulations, Kiera. And so what did she win, Hayley?
So Kiera has won a free on-demand course from the Oklahoma Counseling Institute. And so Kiera, send me an email, shoot me a text, let me know which course you would like. And if you would like to be like Kiera and you'd like to be entered into the drawing for next week's prize, you can do one of 3 or all 3 things. You can like this post, you can share this post, or you can comment your answer to today's question. Every time you do one of those 3 things, not only do you help us grow, you help us be seen by others, we also get entered into the drawing for next week's prize. So that being said, our question for this week is, what was your favorite cartoon growing up? And so, Micah, I'm going to ask you, what was your favorite cartoon as a kid?
Well, it's funny because I took my little puppy, he's about 12 weeks old now, to the vet this morning, and they talked about how much he grew, and just, without thinking about it, I said, he's really been eating his spinach. And so that reminded me that Popeye was one of my favorite cartoons as a kid. And so Popeye, he stands it till he can't stand it no more, and then he eats his spinach and he takes care of old Brutus. So that was one of my favorite ones growing up. So Hayley, how about for
Oh,
you?
well, first of all, do you want to hear some cool Popeye facts?
Oh, sure.
So the reason, so Popeye was kind of used as propaganda in a good way, and during World War II. So during World War II, a lot. So before World War II, whole grain breads, brown rice was really the common staple that Americans ate. But during World War II, they needed to use the fibers in order to make ropes. And so they started to market to Americans eating like white rice and white bread. Well, then kiddos started to get iron deficiencies. And so the US government started to fortify foods, which is how we got Wonder Bread, but also why they started to market Popeye as eating spinach, because spinach, one serving of spinach gives you about 40% of your daily iron. And so they marketed that to kiddos. So kiddos started eating spinach, they started eating Wonder Bread, and so they stopped having as many iron deficiencies. So,
Oh,
yay.
well, this kiddo did not eat spinach, even
You
though
did not.
I wanted to be like Popeye. I did not like spinach, so
Oh,
I could not be like Popeye like that.
never too late, Micah. Never too late. But my cartoon, I loved SpongeBob. I was a SpongeBob
Oh,
kid.
yeah, absolutely.
And now my niece is a SpongeBob kid. So this weekend we hung out, we watched SpongeBob together. So life comes full circle, I guess.
Oh, great, fantastic. So I remember while we were talking real quickly. So watch Tom and Jerry. So Tom and Jerry, how Tom chases Jerry around and tries to like hit him with the cleaver and things like that. And so then whenever my daughter was real little and she was in like pre-K, you know preschool, one of those, they showed Oklahoma, the map, and they said, what does Oklahoma look like? And they were thinking like a pan, things like that. And she said it's one of those things that you hit people with, because she watched Tom and Jerry over at her
Oh my
grandparents'
gosh.
house. And so then during the teachers meeting, the teacher was like, this was something she said. Didn't know if we were like letting her watch like horror flicks or something. I was like, no, it's just Tom and Jerry. That's where she learned that from.
No Texas Chainsaw, not the old way with the sledge. Nope,
Yeah,
just Tom
yeah.
and Jerry.
She didn't get to watch those movies till she was at least like 4 or 5 years old.
Hey,
Texas
there we go.
Chainsaw,
Age
basically.
appropriate.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. A little older before we let her watch that. But anyway, thank everyone so much for joining us today. So if you would like to be entered in the drawing, then tell us what your favorite cartoon was growing up, or even now, if you still like watching some cartoons, tell us what your favorite cartoon was growing up or now. Like, share, anytime that you do one of those things, then you're entered into the drawing where you can win free continuing education.
Yeah, so thank you all so much for your support, and we'll see you next time.
All right, everyone, have a good week. Bye bye.